Hi, folks. Welcome to Points to Ponder. This is your host, Mike. Today, we're going to be talking about why empathy right now is affecting pretty much everything we do. Why, and it's the explanation behind why everything has changed dramatically from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's why people can barely say hi to you if you run into them on the street, even if you live in a small town. And I'm going to jump to this. So, a couple of weeks ago, I'm driving to school. I am a teacher. I went into teaching after a career in management that lasted about 12 years. I worked in both the private and public sector. But I'm driving to school. I hear on the radio that psychologists are talking about how empathy is directly tied to COVID in regards to people either wearing their mask or not wearing their mask. And this just got me thinking. It sparked some serious, deeper thinking. And so I started doing more research. So I come across this study by Conrath, O'Brien, and Singh, and the name of the study is Changes in Dispositional Empathy in American College Students Over Time, a meta-analysis. In this study, they surveyed 14,000 students approximately from 1979 to 2009. And this is what they found. They found that uh, empathetic concern, meaning people's feelings of sympathy for the misfortunes of others, declined by 48%. They also found that the average level of perspective taking, which is when people are allowed or are able to imagine other people's points of view, that declined 34%, which is, I mean, it's staggering. This is staggering. This study right here to me explains everything that's going on. And so right now we have to ask that question, why? Why is empathy declining? And I don't think there's an easy answer, but I would put forward to everyone here that's listening is it's stress. Stress, in my opinion, is the number one reason why empathy is declining. I look at even the younger people in my classroom. The other day, we were supposed to watch a video on empathy, and the students didn't even have the empathy to watch a video on empathy. They completely ignored the video. We're in a serious, like I said, we're in a serious situation. I mean, it's causing people not to wear masks, um, to reduce the transfer of COVID. It's allowing a lot of bad behavior. And so I'm going to just read out a few statistics here, and I will post all my resources in my description for this podcast. But one of my favorite studies is one that the Anxiety and Depression Association of America did back in 2006. And after that point, the American Psychological Association took it over somewhat. But back in 2006, the people that responded to the survey said 72% of the people who have daily stress and anxiety say it interferes with their lives at least moderately. Okay. And then 40% said that they experience persistent stress or excessive anxiety in their daily lives. That's back in 2006. Okay. It's 14 years ago. All right. And even I'm reading some more bullets here. They said workplace performance. 56 said yes, it affected their workplace performance. 51% said yes, it affected their relationships with coworkers and peers. And 50% said it affected their quality of work. 43% said it affected their relationships with their superiors. So this is back in 2006. This is a serious, serious issue. So let's jump to 2019 with a survey that the American Psychological Association put forward, and it's called Stress in America. They do it annually. So mass shootings, 71% said yes, that is stressing them out, or even the fear of mass shootings. 69% said they are stressed over healthcare. All right, we have such this efficient healthcare system that people lose sleep over it at night. That's how efficient it is. Let's jump to the Stress in America 2020 survey, also done by the American Psychological Association. And there's two categories here. There is the category where it's household income under 50,000, and then there's household income over 50,000. So there will be two responses for each one of these categories that I'm going to read off. So 21% report being laid off from a job due to the pandemic. That 21% are those with household income under 50,000. Now those with over 50,000, 11% reported being laid off from a job due to the pandemic. 73% of those with household income under 50K are stressed out over, they report that money is a significant source of stress. 59% of those with household income over 50K report money is a significant source of stress. And then 58% cite housing costs as a significant source of stress. And those are the folks with under 50K household income. 44% cite housing costs as a significant source of stress. Those folks are with household income over 50K. So there's obviously a disparity based on household income and with wages. And now the Brooking Institute also had a great report that they published here in 2018. The authors are Richard Reeves and Catherine Guyot. They are saying that only half of today's 30-year-olds earn more than their parents. They go on to say that the share of children with higher inflation adjusted incomes than their parents declined from around 90% for children born in 1940 to just 50% for those born in 1984. So right there, some clear evidence that the ceiling is dropping on America. We're the opportunities, those clear cut opportunities are diminishing. The rubber band, so to speak, is tightening. And I remember years ago when I worked on a Big Ten university campus, I ran into a retired alumni that came through, and we had a great conversation. He was telling me, he's like, back in his time, he said all it took was hard work and the sky was the limit. He goes, you didn't even need a degree. And then he wanted to tell me that his son, at that point, this was probably 6, 7 years ago, his son, who was in his 50s, highly educated, great experience. And this gentleman that was in front of me was telling me that his son was struggling to just get ahead. That hard work wasn't enough anymore. All right. And I'm just going to add one more stat here. And I'm going to go into some just personal experiences just to add um, a subjective element to everything that I'm talking about right now. But Cameron Huddleston of Yahoo Finance in 2009 had an article stating that 58% of Americans have less than 1,000 in savings. 73% of Americans have less than $5,000 in savings. Again, it goes back to it's more of a struggle. People are living on the margins. It's creating stress. So, in regards to some of my own experiences over the years with experiencing stress and experiencing what we're talking about and seeing this decline in empathy, years ago when my wife and I first left our home state, as she wanted to move closer to some family, particularly her father, her parents were divorced. And I was fine with it. I was fine that it was time to just kind of spread her wings a little bit and see what else was out there. First company that I worked for as a manager, my predecessors had only lasted on tops 4 months. It was that rigorous, that demanding. Yeah, there wasn't a great deal of incentive for people to stick around. So anyway, I saw 60 people leave my department in like about a year and 2 months. And I learned so much even from that experience, just watching these people get their first paycheck and leave. And what it came down to is that the needs of these people are just not being met. And I remember myself, I remember putting on the most weight I've ever had ever in my life during that period because of my own stress from that situation of constantly being on call every holiday, uh, coming in at weird hours in the morning. I learned a lot from that. So then my wife and I moved on to another state. She took a different opportunity. We moved on to another state so she could. Some of her other family members wanted to live closely together. And at that point, hey, I already had a challenging situation. I was ready to try something else. So the first job that I took when we arrived there in this different state, it was over the holidays. I remember working at a corporate chain. I was getting paid approximately $6.55 an hour. I had three bachelor's degrees, and 6.55. That's tough. It's really tough. Worked there for about 3 months, and that corporate chain went out of business, mostly due to just their business model. But it happened during the recession. I was able to find a job a month before that happened. My next job worked at a medium-sized company that was a pioneer during that time in the services that it provided. We had where I was located about 10 direct competitors. Very stressful. The first 3 years, didn't matter how hard I worked. I swear each year I was going to get terminated. We still were up in sales every year. It's still to this day. I look back on that as being an amazing business experience, but it was very stressful. After 3 years, our company got bought out. All of our head office and our senior field managers were terminated. And there were about 12, 13 of us that were retained just because we had priority contracts and priority clients. So they had a meeting with us, basically told us, hey, you're getting paid more money than our current people in similar positions are getting paid. That's a concern, they told us. And then they went on to tell us that everything that would happen at our branches, whether it was our staff who did it or what have you, something that was beyond our control as managers, they said that we were going to be directly held accountable. That was their words. I remember feeling so sick for weeks after that. I never had that severe feeling of just dread and terror, knowing that you can't succeed. My wife and I were working together at the time because we just had a baby, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So when we had our first baby, who happens to be our oldest daughter, um, we couldn't afford insurance. We were what people coined at that time as the working poor. We were making just enough where we didn't qualify for any state aid, and it was, like I said, it was a tough time. We had that we it was a tough time for us to find health care. We were treated like we were from another planet. My family on both my mother's side and my father's side have been here since the very early 1800s. And to see this in action, to see our health, this wonderful healthcare system that people talk about, and to see the treatment of people that you're raised to think that everyone cares, and really no one cares one bit. So our first child, this was supposed to be a wonderful, loving experience, and it was filled with stress. It was filled with stress, and then on top of it, my father-in-law began to fail with due to his age, and was struggling to survive on his own, and so that was added to the stress of how are we going to have this baby. We ended up having it. There were some complications. Um, Long story short, I got my wife to work with me. She was working with me prior to having the baby because she had struggled trying to find work just due to being pregnant, and no one would hire her. I always had got my job done. My immediate supervisor allowed me to hire after the baby was born. When it was her time to take on her shift, we were somewhat of a smaller operation. She literally would have the baby carrier with her. She would pull up. I would meet her at the doors, and we would swap the baby, and she would report to work. And we did this up until we got bought out by a different company. After that, I went on to work for a smaller company, looking for an opportunity where I could grow. Went there, And in 3 months, I realized that the husband and wife owner were were way over their head, and they were way over their head with their own stress. And I quickly realized that the the one owner in particular, as I told a coworker of mine, I said my family would starve under him. And again, I worked there exactly 1 year, moved on, went to work for a large company, and long story short, worked for a large company. I also went into the public sector, worked for an outfit that worked with the public. And one thing I realized in those 5 years combined was that was similar to my other positions to a certain degree, but it was worse really with the large organizations was I had literally no authority but 120% of the responsibility. And also one thing I noticed too is people had bigger resentments at those larger organizations, which carried on and created a complete cancer uh, um, across the private company, across the federal organization I worked for. That literally I was afraid even of my own subordinates. I was afraid that of always some kind of retaliation against me or some kind of accusation. So I spent those 5 years in that situation. And then I finally, and you're looking back at these people, their own stress probably was had created this situation for them, had created their resentment, um, all that pain they went through for years. Anyways, I got out of management, was looking for something positive. I've always enjoyed learning, enjoyed being around people, even after all those negative situations. So I went into teaching, and I just wanted to share some of these stories as we get going with some other podcasts. You'll hear some other private stories about my life, and I'll gladly share with people. But we all share similar stories, but these stories, in my opinion, they're getting worse. They're getting far worse than stories I heard from people in my parents' generation. And imagine the fact that this stress and uncertainty is having on on our children and our quality and sustainability in life. So I will leave you with this question or this point to ponder. This is my final one. So stress is causing the decline of empathy. That's in my opinion. I put the argument out there. But what is the main cause behind all of the stress? So I look forward to hearing from you. Folks, respond to the YouTube channel and we can carry on this conversation another time. But I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. I plan on releasing a podcast at least once a week. This is Mike, and as always, take care.